Howdy, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I'm your host, Daniel Dolphin. Our guest today is one of my favorite people in the horse business. I always have a blast chatting with him. It's Dr. Joe Gotti. He is a retired professor of animal science from Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. He started the equine program there and the Intercollegiate English Riding Team, which was so successful that the athletics department took it over and turned it into a varsity sport. And I have it on confidence that Dr. Gotti could totally have roped that guy and tied him down in a heartbeat, but the professors at the university didn't want him to mark his territory that way, so he was a gentleman about it. He then founded the Intercollegiate Stockhorse Team, which has been very successful. Today, Dr. Gotti judges some shows, he offers clinics and lessons, and he has helped tons of folks in their horsemanship journeys. He also still regularly competes in stock horse, ranch horse, and cutting competitions. He is a playing stylish bloodline aficionado. He is a winner of the annual Mustache I'd Love to Have contest, a fellow parrot head, and an all-around super cool guy. Dr. Gotti, how are you this morning?
So far, so good. Doing great. A little worried about the weather coming in.
Yes, sir. I think we picked a good morning to be inside and talking about this, but I think we're going to have some preparations to make tonight. It just hit over here, probably dropped 20 degrees about an hour ago. So,
oh, wow.
Yes, sir. Well, we always start off each podcast with the short answer lightning round questions. So are you ready to go on those?
We'll try it.
All right. What is your favorite way to relax?
Coffee in the morning, beer in the afternoon.
Okay. Are you more of a morning or an evening person?
Morning.
Are you early?
Yeah. Earlier the better.
I feel you. Bay or sorrel?
Bays. But if you look in my barn, it's mostly sorrel.
Yes, sir. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Say that again.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have a pet peeve that you would like to share with us?
People driving slow in the fast lane.
All right.
I don't care how fast you go, but get over if somebody's trying to pass you.
What about a favorite beverage? You already said coffee in the morning, beer in the evening. What kind of beer?
Land Shark beer, Jimmy Buffett beer.
Yes, sir.
It's an island lager like Corona without the aftertaste.
Will you tell us something unexpected about you?
Most people don't know I play the guitar and sing.
Okay, I didn't know that about you.
There you go. I've always got a guitar pick in my pocket just in case I find a guitar that needs picking.
That's perfect. If you could have any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
Man, I have no idea. I like it just the way it is.
So the real answer is, which ones don't you already have?
Yeah, that's it.
Thoughts or feelings? So are you more an intuitive type of a person or more cerebral and analytical?
Intuitive. Feelings all the way.
Decisive or indecisive?
Oh, very decisive. Yeah. Insanely decisive. Scars to prove that I'm insanely decisive.
All right. Do you have a favorite piece of tack or horse-related tool?
I've got a little short shank broken mouth trammel bit that all my students call a wonder bit because I can put it on any horse and we get along really well. I think it's a combination of the bridle and my ability or inabilities.
It just fits you to a T, huh? Yes, sir.
Yes.
What about a favorite book or movie?
Oh, Lonesome Dove.
The book or the movie?
I like both. The book was much more in depth, I think if I had to pick a book, it would be The American Captain. And that's a hard book to find.
Okay, I haven't never heard of it, but
Exactly.
Lonesome Dove, the book, is my favorite book I've ever read. I read it the first time when I was about 14 or 15. Some of the scenes in which made me wonder why my dad let me read that book at the age of 14 or 15. But I thought it was just an awesome book, truly.
I was a little older than that.
Do you have a guilty pleasure?
Coffee and beer. My lovely bride.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was going to ask this later, but since you said that, this is one of my favorite things about you. Would you tell us how you like your coffee, Dr. Gotti?
Just like my wife, sweet, hot, and blonde.
God, you're my hero. All right.
Well, the rest of that story is I used to drink black coffee when I was married to that old black-hearted woman. Now I drink coffee like my wife. We may have to edit that part out.
What is your favorite dinosaur?
Tyrannosaurus Rex. He knows what to do with his hands.
Have you ever had a UFO encounter?
No, sir. But I did stop for a covered wagon one night coming out of Flagstaff, Arizona on the interstate.
For a covered wagon?
Yeah.
That was like on the interstate traveling down the road?
It was crossing the interstate while I was driving.
That's
It was
cool.
late. I may have been sleep deprived.
So I got a little similar story there. When I was in college, I was in block and bridle, and one of the big things that we would do is help out at the state fair in Shreveport every year. And a buddy of mine and I had been working the hog show for about 3 days, and just breaking up kids' fights or hog fights in the ring, and little kids hitting you with a little stick and all that stuff. And like that, we were pretty sleep deprived. And we were coming back to Ruston probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's following me on I-20, and it's under construction. I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and all of a sudden he smokes the tires, comes to a complete stop in the middle of the interstate. Then he catches back up with me. We get there, and I ask him, why in the hell did you stop like that? He says, man, I swear I saw a hog run out in front of the truck. So many pigs on the brain for the last 3 days. I happened to be looking in my rearview mirror right at that instant. I can assure you there was no hog, but in his mind there was.
Right.
Well, I'm going to give you 212 points, Dr. Gotti. That's the high score on that game right there. Excellent job. And I have been wanting to ask you publicly the question about your coffee for a long time. So that's a bucket list item ticked off for me. Would you give us, in your own words, kind of the 30,000-foot view of your life with horses, how it got started and where it's come to now?
Well, my earliest encounter, I was 4, staying at my grandparents' house for the summer. And they had a little barn and lot out back, and someone had rented it and put some horses in there. So I'd grab some grass. They had grass on the inside of the fence, but I'd grab some grass, crawl up on the fence, and when they'd reach over to get it, I'd slip over on them. No bridle, no halter, nothing. Just get on. And then I got really, really fortunate. I think I went to a Monty Foreman clinic up in Kansas City, and I had a horse that wouldn't pick up the left lead. And I went and watched. It was a 5-day clinic. I went and watched the first day and thought, hey, there's something here that I need. So I went back the second day with my horse, wouldn't pick up the left lead. So the instructor said, well, do this, boom, left lead. I thought, man. Then about 1984, I went out to West Texas to a Ray Hunt clinic, and there were 17 of us in the colt starting class. 30 minutes after we started, all those colts were saddled, all the riders were on, and ain't nobody bucked. I thought that was amazing. So I'd be riding along 6 months or a year later and something would happen. And I'd say, oh crap, that's what Ray was talking about. So 1994, I went out to Alpine, Texas, which is 8 or 10 hours from here, to another Ray Hutt clinic. Same deal, 20 colts, all in the round pen, all saddled. 30 minutes after we started, everybody's going around, ain't nobody bucked. The only thing Ray said to me that whole time was right at the end. He rode up to me and said, just keep doing what you're doing. Boy, I thought, okay. So I paid like $500, $750 for that deal, 5-day clinic. So I was driving home and my chest got all big. Man, Ray Hunt said, just keep doing what you're doing. That's awesome. Well, about 3 o'clock in the morning, we were going through the hill country there by Austin. And I got to think, dang, I paid $750, and the only thing he said to me the whole time was just keep doing what you're doing. But about daylight, we pulled into Nacogdoches. And as the sun was coming up, I thought, oh, he meant just keep doing what you're doing. So that was kind of my epiphany in the horse deal. Working at the university, we'd have a colt starting class, and we'd start 20 to 30 colts every summer. And you learn a lot about watching people and helping them get started. Most of these students had never been on a colt or never started a colt before. So it was pretty interesting to work through the colts and the people's anxieties. So that's pretty much it. I never showed very much until I retired. Now we're showing a lot over in Louisiana and some of those other ranch horse associations. If I hit the lottery, I'd be at a cutting right now instead of on this Zoom meeting. I'd be riding a better horse.
Yes, sir. Well, that's a pretty good deal. I 2 different times almost got to ride with Ray Hunt, but the weather messed both of them up. We had one clinic that got completely canceled, and there was another one that was, I think, a 4-day colt starting clinic, and there was a lady that had one in it that was pretty darn bad. Little contrary to your experience, nobody could ride him. They got him settled, and then there was another guy that was supposed to ride him, and he promptly got bucked off a couple times pretty bad. And they were going to have me try to ride him the last day. This is when I'm 20 or something like that, so I was bulletproof. And it got rained out, and so I never got to meet him, see him in person, or anything like that. But anyway, c'est la vie. So would you say from your perch as a professor and a lifelong horseman, are there any trends that you see in the industry? I mean, you've seen the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and now into the teens and 220s. What differences would you say the industry has gone through in that period of time?
Back in when I started, you took one horse to the horse show and you did everything on it. And then we got really, really specialized. Pleasure horses only do pleasure. Reining horses only do reining, and on down the line. And now with this versatility thing coming back, you take one horse and do everything. So we've come full circle. And I really like the idea of being able to get on one horse and do whatever you need to.
I've always had a soft spot, even when we were doing cutting. Usually my favorite horses were the turnback horses because they were kind of the ones that did all of it. And the cutting horses, they get loped around a little bit and they go work for 2.5 minutes, but that turnback horse has a 15-hour day. They were the real athletes out there. So what about trends horsemanship wise? Like you pretty well lived through the natural horsemanship revolution and Ray and Tom and all of that. Would you say that we're a whole lot better off right now in general than we were 40 years ago, or still have problems, but different problems, or how would you characterize it?
Well, I think it's a lot better. I think people aren't as reactive as they used to be. I watched, we were on a tour at a ranch someplace, and they'd rope the hind foot of every horse, ear them down, saddle them, and get on. And that was pretty rough. And the trend now is to think it through as a person and allow the horse to think it through and accept what's going on. So I think it's better. I think there are still some areas that need improving, but that's always going to be the way it is.
Hopefully. Yes, sir. Wouldn't it be boring if we figured it all out? That'd be terrible.
We're bulletproof again.
Yes. Well, where would you say we are in our journey right there? Like, to me, one of the sort of big changes in the last 7 or 8 years is the brain science stuff that's starting to be talked about a lot more. Dr. Stephen Peters, I think, had a pretty big hand in that. Was any of that in your repertoire as a professor, or are you kind of on this journey with the rest of us on the brain science end?
Well, I think we're all on the same journey, just at different points. Science can be pretty misleading. I think you have to start where the horse is and then build on that.
I'll tell you what, I was going to get into this later too, but since we've brought this up, the last Q&A that I did, which I think as we're having this conversation hasn't been released yet, but it was actually on some of the science and some of the flaws and things and the words that get, like, for instance, I've heard probably 4 or 5 times in the last few months of how the whole leadership thing has been debunked. And I take pretty strong exception a lot of times to the word debunk. That usually means that one study came out that someone extrapolated one thing out of, and then they pretend like 80 years of behaviorism doesn't exist anymore all of a sudden. So
yes.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Are there any particular research projects or studies that you draw on, or are you a B.F. Skinner guy, or what on the science end of things have you got?
I think we need to go back to Pavlov's dog. Ring the bell, get rewarded. And if you approach horsemanship with that same attitude, it usually works out. I went a different direction, didn't I? I can see by your face you weren't thinking that.
I was not expecting you to go there. No, sir. Well, so the realm of classical conditioning, I guess one of the things that I tend to think about is that every single problem horse I think I've ever dealt with, what I'm really dealing with there is a conditioned response, which is what Pavlov's method was getting to, where we wind up tying and I'm going to get out of the technical terms here. I've already done a video explaining the technical terms, but basically we have tied a stimulus that used to mean nothing to it, an unconscious physiological act like the salivation. You can't make yourself salivate. You can't make yourself not salivate. And we can do the same thing with bucking in a saddle and associate those two things in a bad way, or being tied and setting back, or any hard to bridle, just about anything you could quote unquote accidentally teach a horse the wrong thing about winds up being a conditioned response type of a deal. So that's one of the things I like to tell people about it, is that all of those terms are innate in nature. They really have or amoral, I guess is a better word. They're not good or bad. They're just what they are. So conditioned response could be a very helpful, pleasant thing, and it could be a very bad, dangerous thing. It all depends on how you set it up and what response you got,
Absolutely. And my example is, if I say chair, some chair comes to your mind. And if I say chair to a horse, probably nothing happens. But if I say a wooden chair with rockers and a soft cushion seat, then your mind changes. right? You went from whatever chair you had to now we're both looking at the same chair. And if I continue to extrapolate my description, pretty soon we've got the same chair in mind. And to me, that is exactly horse training.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, sir. And just as you did, your chair gets more detailed and more complex. So does the training and the sophistication of the cues and the subtlety with which we can give them. That's a beautiful example.
And 30 days from now, if you and I are talking and I say, hey, do you remember that chair we were talking about? Yes. You're looking at the rocking chair with the padded seat. And yeah, that's horse training.
Yes, sir. Well, I know you've got a passel of kids and grandkids. How different is horse training from kid training in your mind? I find I do a lot better with the horses than I do with the kids.
When I was in South Carolina, there was this guy named George Hyman, and he was a Georgia cracker. He had a horse trailer everywhere he went, had a horse in the back saddled with his slicker on the back, 3 or 4 catch ropes tied to the horse. He said, training horses and dogs and people is all the same. It's just harder to fool the horses and dogs.
That's one of those things that I like when, and I know you've run across this too, but you might be explaining something behavioral wise to a person and then someone chipes in, but yeah, this is a thoroughbred. It doesn't work like that with the thoroughbred. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, you use these same principles to train a chicken or an octopus or a camel. So if it works with different species, I'm pretty sure it'll work with different breeds of horses too.
Absolutely.
So back to the industry trends and stuff. I brought up the neurochemistry and that type of a thing. What do you see the morph as being, from whatever period you choose to pick to where we are now? How do you view the industry and kind of our current trends? You mentioned the ranch versatility horse. What else are you seeing?
Man, I don't know.
That's fair enough. Yes, sir.
My circle's pretty small.
Okay. Well, how about I'll ask this in a little different way. Whatever you consider the average horse owner to be, where would you say that the average horse owner is weak and kind of those perennial problems that they all walk up to you and you got to fix this on just about everybody. So what sort of trends do you see there that most everybody needs to figure out and kind of get beyond?
I understand that question. Generally, what
I
I tell
explained
them,
a better chair there, huh?
there you go. Generally, what I tell them is do less and get more. Do less sooner. And that's philosophical, but it's also very mechanical. They can feel a fly. I looked, and I've been saying that a long time. I looked it up one time. A fly weighs between 17 and 29 milligrams. They can feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we pulling on them? Once in a while, we'll pull on them to save our lives. Mostly, we don't need to.
One of my favorite simplistic sayings is that everybody needs to pull less and kick more.
Yeah.
One of my first demo horses way back when, I thought I needed to be in front of people teaching them all of the wonderful things that I knew when I was all of 19 or 20 and thought I knew a whole lot of stuff. But I did actually train a horse where I could sit on him with slack in the reins, just relax with my hands up on the saddle horn, and I could squeeze the saddle horn, and he cued off of that to nod his head like he was saying yes. And my whole plan was, that never really came to fruition in front of crowds so much, but just the sheer fact that a horse could feel me tense my body to squeeze the saddle horn, feel that through me, through the saddle enough to take a cue off of it. That's a hell of a sensitive animal right there. And just like you say, we go around dragging 20 pounds on their mouth thinking we need to. It's kind of silly. So here's another topic for you. Chili. Beans or no beans?
Yeah, I grew up in Kansas. We put beans in the chili.
Is that going to get you hung while you're living in Texas, though? Is that going to be a problem?
No, we'll be fine.
The pineapple on pizza thing is mostly California people for whatever. That really ruffles some feathers. That's Texas's version, I guess, the beans in chili.
I lived in California for a year. Maybe that's where I picked it up.
There's a story I have been wanting to tell. I'm currently working on a book of short stories, and this is one that I'm going to write about, but I've been dying to say this, and the chili with beans thing prompts it out of me. But there was a cutting horse guy that I won't name, but he was an owner and one of the big wigs, the kind of guys that could drop 20 grand at a show and that kind of thing. And he had a bunch of the other big wigs over to his ranch. And when I say big wigs, like one of the families that was at his ranch was one of the 3 founding families of Taco Bell. So, we're not talking millions, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And his place is in North Louisiana, where one of the fairly traditional foods is chitlins. Are you familiar with what chitlins are?
Sure.
Okay, so
Sure.
For those that might not be, that basically you're taking the intestines of a pig and you clean them out the traditional way. You take your shoes off and you run them between your toes with a water hose, and that's how you clean them out and everything. And then you stuff them with a meat and rice sort of a mixture, and you cook them and then you serve them up and cut in. They kind of make like sausages. So he does this for this group of obscenely rich people, but he makes one important distinction. To the mix of rice and meat, he adds whole kernel corn. And he cooks this up for them, and they bring it out, and he serves it to this group of people, and they don't have any idea what they're eating. And about halfway through the meal, he starts describing to them what it is. And to me, the hilarity of, I usually can't get through this story without laughing so hard I can't tell the story. But these are horse and cow people who are now eating what they know to be an intestine and see whole kernel corn coming out the backside of it. You just imagine. I mean, they could have been having caviar and lobster and $1,000 champagne, and he's feeding them intestines with whole kernel corn coming out the backside of it. I think that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard of, I think.
That's a great story.
I don't feel like I did a good job of telling it, but anyway, maybe the mental picture in somebody's mind will be a good one. Well, you've been doing a fair bit of judging the last few years. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know I started judging a little bit too, and it had a greater effect on me and changed my stuff around more than I would have ever believed. So how has it affected you?
I think it's really fun and exciting to be able to judge. What most of the time when I'm judging, I want to get on that horse and fix it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
You make a lot of contacts and get some clients out of the deal, and occasionally you get a chance to fix what you saw. Most riders in the stuff I judge, other than the open is good, but once you move past the open, there's a tremendous lack of knowledge. Maybe not skill, but knowledge. They just don't understand.
How about this? One of the things that shocked me the most when I started judging was how many people apparently don't know the rules. Have you noticed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They come in and ride the wrong pattern, or they just make basic, very unnecessary mistakes and wind up costing themselves. And I've always kind of felt like as the judge, I'm sort of in there rooting for everybody, and I sure hate to have to ding them here or DQ them or whatever it requires. But it just astounds me how many people. I remember judging a trail class one time. I think everybody just watches the first person or the person in front of them in line. And that first person that came into this class messed something up in the order of the obstacles where I had to DQ them. And like 8 people followed the mama duck and all replicated the same mistake all the way through. I think it was only the last 2 or 3 people in the class that I didn't have to DQ.
Well,
I didn't feel like I could stop it in the middle and change it for anybody, but after the class was over, it's kind of like, hey, just so everybody in the show knows this, don't follow the person in front of you. They may have made a fatal error here.
We've all been off pattern, even me occasionally. But I used to tell my students, it's not the horse's fault if you're off pattern. When I was learning this cutting thing and starting to go quite a bit, they called me Dr. Rule Book because I had read the rule book and I'd studied the films and videos and knew what we were supposed to be doing. I couldn't always get it done, but I knew what the rules were.
I do know just what you mean with wanting to jump on the horse and fix it. When I started doing lessons and clinics and stuff like that, I took me probably a year to get the urge out to just take the horse away from them and fix the problem and hand it back before I realized that wasn't really what my job was anymore, But
yeah, and after the incident, my wife told me I couldn't get on anybody else's horse.
Oh, I didn't realize that happened on someone else's horse.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Well, do you mind talking about that or
no, it'll be fine. I had gone to Stephenville to help a lady and her son with their horsemanship. We were going to spend the day, and she was having trouble. We were just getting started. She was having trouble with her horse. And I thought, well, she's just not being assertive enough. Here, let me hold my beer and let me get on. Was my attitude. I didn't have a beer at that point, but that was my attitude. I got on that horse and she bucked me off, which was just fine, except the fence was right there and she had to turn around and come back. And when she did, she stomped on my chest, broke 8 ribs in multiple places, flailed chest. I finished the lesson. Then it took me about 30 minutes to get to the car. Went to the Stephenville ER. They give me 4 shots of morphine, charged me $8,000, put me on a helicopter, $65,000, flew to Fort Worth, was there for 5 days in ICU. They plated 4 of those ribs. They used 41 screws. The screws cost $1,100 a piece. So in there for 5 days, $123,000. In February 23rd will be a year, and I'm good. I'm back to where I need to be.
Yes, sir.
Both physically and mentally. That deals like that to kind of back up your mental position a little bit.
Yes, sir. I do know what you mean. When I was 19, I had a horse flip over on me and stuck the saddle horn in my thigh. It was an old colt breaking saddle with no leather on the horn, so it was just a steel stud about the size of a quarter, and almost severed 2 of my quadriceps. You could literally have taken a beer can and put it down into my thigh all the way to the bone. I have some great Polaroids of it, and I had to drag myself about 3/4 of a mile out of the woods back to the barn. It so happened that happened when my boss was at the futurity. So I was there all alone by myself. When I got to the barn, I also had to crawl through a hot wire fence to get to the barn, which took about 3 minutes in that condition. And to this day, if you walk up and shock me, I will knock the hell out of you. I don't find electricity funny at all. But anyway, I decided I wanted another person around me at that time. So I hopped on his 4-wheeler, and there was a little trucking dispatch office down the road. So I rode the 4-wheeler over there and signaled to the lady through the window, and she knew who I was. She saw me riding past there and stuff all the time. And she motioned for me to come inside, and I motioned for her. I couldn't come back out. So she came outside, and as soon as she saw me and all the blood and everything, she went into shock. So I had to get her to go back inside and come out with the cordless phones. I had to call 911 for myself and give the ambulance directions, and then take care of the lady that had gone into shock looking at me. It was a great day. But anyway, for probably the next 2 or 3 months after that, every time I closed my eyes, I saw that damn horse coming down on top of me again. So I think sometimes people get the feeling like those of us that do this professionally are bulletproof and we don't ever have fears to get over or issues like that. And we damn sure do. So anyway, we just don't usually talk about it except to each other, right?
That's it. Yeah, we don't tell people that our confidence is somewhat lacking.
So speaking of that, conversations behind the scenes, do you remember the first time we met?
I think it was at a colt starting deal in Louisiana, wasn't it?
It was. And you walked up, and the other guy and I were chatting, and you walked up to us, and the first words out of your mouth were, "Neither of you guys has a gun, do you?" You remember that?
No.
And I'm going, what in the hell have I gotten myself into in this competition here? We gonna have a gunfight or what? You want to tell that story? Do you remember it? Or?
No, I don't remember it.
So you had been in that competition before a couple of years, and there was another guy in it who decided as part of his.
Yeah.
All right, you wanna take it?
Yeah, the year before I met you, I was at that competition, and at the end of it, you do this little, how far you've gotten along, and this guy pulls out a gun and starts shooting. Well, I'm a little bit nervous about that. I hit the deck. So that prompted the question to you two guys, you and Jay, about did anybody have a gun?
Yeah. I can only imagine. There were a few times because we're all out there in round pens that are about 10 feet apart, and you get focused on your horse, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, 12 feet off to your left there, and you might not have been at a real good time for what you were doing with your particular horse. So I can only imagine being in the zone at a skittish little spot right there, and somebody shoots a gun off right there. That must have been a lot of fun. Well, all right. Well, I think it's about time for our sponsor for this episode, Dr. Gotti. And I always try to make sure we get the sponsor tailored to the guest. So in honor of you, Sam Elliott called and said, "You guys look like 8-year-old boys. It's time to show some masculinity. Dr. Heidenfrog's mustache stimulator. Have you always wanted a lush, full mustache like Rosie O'Donnell? Perhaps you're old school and want to rock a pencil-thin mustache while driving a convertible to the Keys and blasting Jimmy Buffett. Or maybe you want all the girls in your classic horns on the hood caddy. Well, Dr. Heidenfrog's is your daddy. If you've been searching for a way to greatly improve your flavor saver, it's right under your nose. Dr. Heidenfrog's mustache stimulator will give you the lip brum to make other men jealous. Our patented follicle fertilizer will kickstart your sex appeal. Women will want you. Elk and bison will fear you. Your goatee could be the envy of all the does. Your Fu Manchu will have all the ladies saying, God bless that man. Your twisted ends will have the ladies tied in knots. Dr. Heidenfrog's mustache stimulator. Don't shave it for later. Pick some up today. We know it'll grow on you. Available in various scents like the blood of your enemies, black coffee, peaty scotch, or Kentucky bourbon and mahogany. And for you millennials working on being a man, we can introduce you softly with lavender, half-calf mocha latte, and mint and honey. We also have Dr. Heidenfrog's industrial mustache wax offered at a discount because you're going to need it. All right. What do you think?
I was at the auto parts store the other day getting some stuff for my truck, the fuel filter, and this little girl behind the counter, she must have been 18 or 19, walks up and says, "I'm not weird or anything, but I love your mustache." I said, "Well, I was born with this. I was an ugly baby."
Oh, I'm trying to think of his name. You watch the UFC or any of that fighting stuff very much?
No.
There's a guy named Don the Predator Fry, and he's an old school fella. He was fighting way before the US was popular with that stuff. but he's probably most well known for his mustache, and that's one of his taglines. Anytime anybody asks him about it, it takes him about a half an hour to shave it off every morning. You know. Well, what about, I threw Jimmy Buffett in the commercial there for you. I know we're both parrot heads. Tell me a Jimmy Buffett story. Have you got anything?
Yes, a group of professors and I went to Dallas to watch Jimmy Buffett, and we took a young man with us. His name was Michael Love. He was African American, and he had never seen anything like Jimmy Buffett. We had some beverages on the way up there, and got our seats. We were having a big time. Pretty soon we looked down in front of the stage, and there was Micah. He had put on a Pepsi vest and just walked right up to the front of the stage. It was amazing. We still talk about Micah and his Jimmy Buffett experience.
That's the confident clipboard theory, huh? It look like you belong there and no one will question you. You can get anywhere you want, huh?
That's right.
I always thought I was probably born to be Jimmy Buffett's son-in-law. I think I'd have made him a hell of a son-in-law, but it just never worked out that way. We have a lot of similar interests. Have you ever read any of his books? A Salty Piece of Land or anything? He's really quite the talented author too. I like all of his stuff. So anyway.
We'd gone to Houston to a concert, and one of my friends said, "Man, he has so much energy on stage." I said, "Damn it, Miles. Look at that shirt. He only works 3 days a week."
I kind of wonder about him. Like that man has amassed a hell of an empire. He owns hotels, casinos. There's no way he's as laid back in the background as he portrays. He's got to be pretty busy with all of that stuff, I would think, or very trusting with his management team. One of the two.
Well, he tells a story about Hawaiian shirts, that he was up in Michigan someplace and went into the Army surplus store because that's where they had Hawaiian shirts. "Oh yeah, we see," the proprietor said, "Yeah, we sell out of these every time you come to town." He said, "Maybe I ought to get in the shirt business."
A seed was planted that day, huh?
Yes.
I think he'd be a hell of a fun guy to kick around with for a weekend. There's no telling what you might do or where you might go. Well, I guess I would say most of your niche, I think of you as sort of a cut and ranch horse guy and sort of cattle involved sort of thing. Is that fair to say? Is that your favorite part of the horse deal, or?
Yes, absolutely. I really like the cutting thing, but it's so money driven, and the elite are pretty elite. It's hard to break into that top row.
One of the things that I loved about cutting was that it was not nearly as fad driven. You know, if you look at a pleasure horse in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, it'd be a different picture every single time as far as what fad is going and influencing. Reining horses would be the same way. Cutting horses really aren't. You know, they pretty much are doing their thing. Well, after the 80s anyway, there really hadn't been that many changes to me.
They're using these bonnets now in their training program to keep that head lower and lower and lower. And I'm not sure that's a good thing. Yep. I mean, it looks pretty, but how do you get there?
I can't say I have much experience. I didn't know back when I was doing it, there were a couple of trainers, like the cable bonnet you're talking about, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I didn't want to say brain chain.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
But
I would say I knew a couple of guys. I'm not going to name them, but I can think of specifically who they were, and they were more the weekend warrior, older horse type of deal where sometimes you get a horse that's a little soured or he's not winning and you got to do something to bump him into the top 10 or whatever.
Mhm.
Like I actually have to say a lot of what people tend to say are the flaws of the young horse futurity game and all. My experience is very contrary to that. Like there were loads of 2-year-olds that I started that are still rolling right now that are in their 20s.
Right.
Like
Right.
I haven't seen nearly the unsound that everybody says, those futurity horses, by the time they're 6, they're done. I don't find that to be in any way, shape, or form true. In fact, in my world, when horse slaughter got banned in 2007, I started getting a bunch of older horses into break. I mean, like 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
And I have had, I don't have data behind this. This is just my anecdotal memory, but I've had way more trouble keeping those older horses getting started sound than I ever did with the 2-year-olds.
Well, I think if you look at the research data, the bone formation and growth is stimulated by exercise. So
Yes, sir.
one of the trends that the cutters are doing that I'm a little iffy about is injections of 2-year-olds, hock injections. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I've got a playing stylish horse that's 22 now. I started injecting him when he was 20, not because he needed it, just because I thought he might need it.
Yes, sir. So like I'll say on that end, it used to not be a real uncommon thing for 2-year-olds, usually toward the end of their year when you're stepping things up and getting them ready to be a 3-year-old in a bridle around the corner there. Usually the really good ones would need an injection at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
One adjustment that I made is I stopped loping them to warm them up. I started just long trotting and not doing near as much warm up. It really was more, I was trying to work them fresher. That was the bigger thing, and kind of get them under control without having 45 minutes of wearing them out first, So we just trot around 2 or 3 circles each way. My hock injections went down like 75%.
Oh, wow.
I think the loping circles is what tears them down. I don't think it's working cattle at all. I think it's loping all those damn circles. I really believe that. I'd love to see a study on it of some kind, but I mean, it made a, not like a 5% difference, like a 75% difference, So
That's amazing. And if your cutter has to lope, you aren't going to win anyway.
That's another, like that. Some of those weekend warrior guys, there was one trainer in particular. I never worked for him, but he hired me to come lope for him at shows a time or two. And I mean, he had horses that you would literally lope 3 hours nonstop.
Yeah.
And then he would go show them. And I was just thinking, like, damn, man, if I got to do that to show a horse, I don't want, I don't want any part of that. That's absurd. I mean, I understand getting them a little sweat going or something like that, it's blood pumping, but damn, 3 hours to go show one for 2 minutes that ain't a direction I want to travel in, So
Absolutely.
Anyway, but what we were talking about, the fads, I have always found cutting to be political as hell. I mean, you get to a point where you can judge the run as good as the judges are, and you get somebody without a name who goes in there on a no-name horse, and they'll mark a 72 for the same thing they'd mark a famous guy 74, and there's really no way to get that out of the system. That's just it's kind of built into it, or they know so and so's making a run this year on that stallion and he's going to drop $100,000 in the process, so we're going to help him out a little bit. He needs to boost his winnings this weekend or whatever, and the rest of you are just donating to the cause without consent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of like taxes.
Yeah, I was never real big on those aspects of it.
I've got a story about that. When I was first starting to ride bulls, up there in Kansas, John Macbeth was breaking into the PRCA. I think it was the RCA then, but anyway, he was still coming to some of those amateur shows and riding. So John, is that RCA pretty political? He said, well, I don't know. He said, the first horse I got on, I marked a 74 and win $1,328.15. I didn't think it was political at all. So if you're good enough, it don't matter.
Yes. I used to ride bulls myself, but I never had the family connections, or I was just the kid that showed up and nobody knew who I was, and I would do my ride. The last year I rode, I covered 75% of my stock. And as you know, in bull riding, that's pretty damn high. Most guys are maybe a third of their bulls or something like that. I didn't win a check. And
wow,
that gave me the red ass to a very large degree. The last rodeo I rode in, I had a re-ride bull in the first go. And the guy that had the bull before me marked, I don't know, 74 or something like that on him, but like barely got him covered. He didn't get bucked off, but definitely had no spur and no extra thing. About an hour later, I have the same bull, and I spurred the dog shit out of this thing. I mean, I put on the show, and they marked me 1 point lower than the other guy. And I said, y'all can kiss my ass. I'm done. I've never been on another one since. So,
yep. I had a similar deal when I was at college rodeo there at Fort Hays. Lyle Sankey was going to school there and on the rodeo team. We were both riding bulls, and he put on a nice ride. And then I came out and put on what I thought was a great ride, and I was 2 points lower than him. Well, shit, everybody knows Lyle Sankey rides bulls better than me. 2 points better.
yes, sir. I understand why people get into the speed events and stuff, because the clock doesn't judge. It is what it is, and you were either faster or you were slower. Anyway.
Yeah, most judges are fair.
Yes, sir. Most of them are. I mean, I guess it's like anything. There's good ones and there's bad ones.
Having been on the other side of that, having been a judge, I never criticize the judging. Does that make sense?
A little bit, yes, sir. I mean, I'll say a few things. One, there was an association that I was a carded judge for, and so I became very familiar with their rule book and all of that stuff. And so specifically with regard to bits, when they got into their rule book, the guy that had written it was attempting to outlaw gag bits. The way that he wrote it, technically he outlawed all curb bits.
Oh, wow.
And I kept telling him for like 3 or 4 years, because it was an association you had to retest every year. Every time I'd come across it, I'm like, damn, you hadn't fixed this yet? And I'd send him an email. And it kind of struck me that every judge is going through this, and none of the rest of them seem to notice that the rule book has outlawed curb bits. And we're all supposed to be taking the same test here. So I guess that was part of it. And a few of them I knew, and they were pretty good horsemen that should have caught the same thing I was catching in there. Mm-hmm. And the guy that wrote the rule book, the same thing. He was a lifelong reining trainer. If he doesn't know the mechanics of a dang curb bit, anyway, sometimes it's all fallible, I guess.
Yes. He
did eventually change it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your days at Stephen F. Austin and starting up the Intercollegiate Rodeo Team and the English group and all of that stuff? Because I don't know if a lot of people might not know you, but you're one of these, you're as cowboy looking can be. So you out there judging a bunch of young girls on hunters is not where someone would expect to see you. So how did that go?
I had a lot of help. Several years before we started the equine program, I was doing this colt starting class, and we'd ride lots of horses. When I put forth the idea of an equestrian team, I knew that we would get young ladies to come to school there. If you can bring your horse, you're going to come to school here. Well, every one of them is going to bring a hairy-legged boy with them, so I was getting 2 for 1. I found that most of the guys would not be on the ranch horse team or the equestrian team. Their ego was too fragile. They let them girls beat them, and now I ain't doing that no more. But they would still come and hang out at the barn with their. I mean, if you got 15 or 20 girls out there, them boys are going to hang around.
Find that spot, yes, sir.
So anyway, we started the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association with like 5 or 6 girls, and had grown it to 30 when I pitched the idea to the athletic department. You know, I said, we'll have 25 girls the first year, because I already had 30. I knew if I could get 25, we'll have 50 the second year and 100 the third year. And I said, isn't there like a Title 9 or Title 11 or something where if we add another female sport, you can add another male sport, like baseball? I had already talked to one of the Board of Regents. He had gone through SFA on a baseball scholarship, but they had to do away with it because of the Title 11 thing. So anyway, I had already tilled the ground and planted the seed, and so it was pretty well received. My thought there was I'll teach 1 or 2 classes at the university and coach the varsity team the rest of the time. Well, they hired a young lady from Georgia to be the varsity team coach. Yeah. And she hired one of the first graduate from SFA's equine program to be her English assistant riding instructor. So they rocked along there for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, they only had 25 young ladies. And that wouldn't support the baseball team. Mm-hmm. So they disbanded the program.
Oh, dang.
Well, took up bowling and golf instead.
Well,
they were athletic department was real classy in the way that they disbanded the team. They gave all those girls the scholarships throughout their career. They gave us all the horses and the budget that they were using for the horses. So we got a big influx of horses and money.
Dang.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Never enough money when you got horses. But once we got that, I had already started a ranch horse team with kind of some of the school horses, riding horses. But now we had these good reiners and English horses that we could use to show. So that we showed my team showed university horses, and most of them were pretty nice.
That sounds like a good deal there. I was trying to pick a fight between you and the athletic department, but it sounds like you were on the other side of that than I was figuring. So,
well, anyway. I was pretty disappointed when they didn't pick me as the coach, but somebody was looking out for me. I didn't need to be the coach of that deal. It worked out better this way.
Yes, sir. Well, we seem to be. You familiar with the Pareto principle? Basically, it's that the big things tend to get bigger and the smaller things tend to get smaller, and it's actually an economics principle, but it applies throughout universe. So if you look in a forest, the top 10% of the trees have 90% of all of the biomass of the forest. In the universe, it's something like the top 3%. The 3% largest stars contain 99% of all of the mass in the entire universe, something like that. And it's the same way in economics. The billionaires get richer while the little people struggle more and more and more and more. And I'm seeing that principle at work right now in the equine programs in the colleges. The mid to small colleges are struggling and dwindling, and the ones like Florida and Texas A&M and Colorado State are we're going to wind up where we've got 6 equine colleges in the whole country. If you want to be in an equine degree, you're going to have to go to one of those. But the like we used to have 4 here in the state of Louisiana. I think we're going to be down to 2 here real quick. So anyway, it's the way it goes, I guess. And I have to say, I have some of my experience as a professional with the college kids that graduate in equine science. I have found that a lot of them need more horse handling. You know, that's I can remember I had an apprentice that worked for me, and when she graduated, I went to visit her, and they were having a demonstration, and this was, I won't name it, but it's a horse college. Like every single person on that campus is there to ride. And I mean, they had seniors loping around on the wrong lead, had no idea that they were on the wrong lead. And I was thinking, how in the hell do you graduate with a degree in equine science from a horse college and you don't know your leads yet, you know?
Maybe they were cantering.
Well, yes, sir. I don't think it was on purpose. I'm pretty sure it was, but anyway, I doubt your kids were in that shape, but that was one of the things I was really fortunate for. I went to Louisiana Tech, and we really did get a lot of hands-on time with the animals and all. And I usually go back there and do a clinic or two a year. And I always tell them, if you aren't hands-on with the horses out here, you need a horse job out there, and you need to walk like a duck and quack like a duck and smell like a duck, because when you go for a job interview, I'm going to know within 10 seconds whether I have to babysit you on a horse farm or not. You know, you better be, you better be able to lead a horse over there and look like you know what you're doing.
In that colt starting class, the third day I'd take them out of the arena. I had several outriders. The anxiety level got pretty high, but mostly we did okay.
My colt starting clinics, I'm not near as quick as Ray Hunt. It probably takes us half the day to get everybody saddled and everything. I have no idea how he did that quickly. And I top at 8. I have no idea how he keep it. I would be terrified with 17 people on colts. I don't have that many eyes to watch everybody, you know. But the final day of it, one of the graduating steps is we will have all the colts with riders in the arena, and one of them will be dragging a tarp on a rope behind it and lope in and out all the horses, getting closer and closer until it's dragging the tarp across the hocks of all these colts. And I kind of figure, if you've been playing with this horse for 4 days and you wind up loping around dragging a tarp, and you can sit on him with slack in the reins, and someone buzzes past you and catches your butt with a tarp and your colt stands there, then you probably have the confidence to go through whatever else the world might throw at you, and you'll be okay about it, you know. So,
yeah, you bet.
Where were y'all getting the colts for that class? Did y'all have colts born on the place enough to supply that, or were y'all taking outside horses in? Or
there towards the last, we had our own colts, but mostly it was just community people sending us horses.
Okay. So what about, sir, go ahead.
There was this older gentleman that used to send us 1 or 2 colts every year, the fillies that he was going to put in his broodmare band. Mm-hmm. And I'd always pick one of them out and say, boy, this is a nice filly. I'd like to buy her. Well, no, that belongs to my wife. I couldn't sell that one. Okay, well, and that went on for 20 years. I'd pick one out. No, that belongs to my wife. Well, I'm pretty sure that wasn't true, but he got in bad health where he couldn't take care of his horses anymore. So he called me one day and said, I need you to come out. We need to talk. He said, I'm going to give the university these horses, these broodmares. There were 20 of them. 19 of them had been through the colt starting class. I'd worked on that deal for a long time to get that worked out. Anyway, we got those 20 or so mares, and they all had half of them had colts on them. And then we found a nice stallion that this lady let us use, cutting horse bred that we bred those mares to, and got some pretty nice babies.
Well, that sounds like a pretty darn good deal for the university right there. I would love to see one of them. Stephen F. Austin isn't that far away. I would love to see one with a real thriving equine program somewhere in the neighborhood. We've got McNeese around here, but I think they're more rodeo type, run fast sort of stuff. So
right.
Were y'all involved in very much research at Stephen F. Austin? Were y'all doing any feed trials or foreman type stuff or any sort of academic research there?
A little bit, not much. Purina did a senior equine study with us like 2 or 3 times, but mostly no. Mostly we just rode horses. Don't throw me in the briar patch.
That's not a bad way to be. Yes, sir. Well, why don't we, if you don't mind, shall we jump back into the topic of research a little bit? And maybe you could offer some tips or hints or resources of, I think a decent number of my following are people that are interested in that type of a thing. And so what are your thoughts? When I say research for average horse people, you don't seem to be cringing too hard back there. And I know you have commented with me before that probably the average person would have a pretty hard time reading one of these papers and making heads or tails of it. And I do completely agree with that. I am not at all afraid to look up a word here and there and so forth as I'm coming through some of that stuff. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think we've got a tremendous program of basic research by the major land-grant universities, and then the extension service that is charged with getting that information out to the public. So there's an avenue there that makes that learnable. Most of the basic research is beyond, for lack of a better term, layman understanding, but that's what the extension specialists are for. So to disseminate that information.
So I would say I don't know exactly how to say this, and I don't mean it in any egotistical way, but I've kind of placed myself as a bullshit detector on some of this stuff, and I try to ring the alarm sometimes when some of the ridiculous research comes out. So like I see research a decent bit where when you read the stuff, it's fairly evident that we're not dealing with an unbiased source there, that there was kind of an agenda behind this one or something like that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, research is a broad term. It like you named land grant universities and all, and so in practice or in theory there we're talking about reputable sources, but that isn't necessarily where all research comes from. So
well, absolutely. And the point of research is it repeatable? All right. You do this trial as a feed company and say, oh, this Super X feed is fabulous. Well, let me as a researcher take that same trial and see if I can replicate it. The problem with horse research is that it's very, very expensive, and most of the research involves very few numbers, right? Like we had 5 horses in this trial and 5 horses in this trial. Well, it's relatively easy to extrapolate beyond the data.
yes, sir. That's not a significant sample size. Yes, sir. What about other, like I would say there are a few infamous research papers that I could point to where one particular study started a trend and maybe more was drawn out of it than should be. Like I would, one of the very recent and famous examples of that would be the Mustang hoof barefoot horse theory, where they had taking these Mustangs and looking at where the hooves and so forth, and then basically saying that all horses in all environments and under all nutritional loads and under all exercise loads need to replicate this because this is the model for the rest of us. And I don't think that holds up to very much scrutiny. Have you seen many of those other type of things, or could you give us an example?
And I think that's a prime example of extrapolating beyond the data, where Mustangs are in a unique environment. They long trot 25 miles to get to water. Most of the domestic horses are in a stall at least half their life, never have to work, they're over fat. It's apples and oranges.
Yes. There was another one that was done, this was in Australia, but they took a group of horses from the desert environment and brought them to a boggy environment. There were feral horses. And then they took the feral horses that were in the boggy environment and they took them to the outback, presumably, or wherever, and dropped them off. And they were going to get them back up in 6 months and look at what changes their hooves had gone through. Well, the group that came from the moist area and was brought to the desert within 2 weeks, almost all of them were so lame they couldn't get to water anymore. And they had to go and rescue them. Their hooves had cracked and split, and they were just a bunch of lame horses. And it seems to me like there's as much to learn from that failed research as there is from the real research. You know, the hoof does not just magically change itself overnight and accommodate any sort of environment. And there are repercussions to some of those changes like that. And also, you know, very few people know about that project, where we kind of have something that may be contradictory to what is being said. We handpick what research we're going to decide to follow. There's almost a social trend about that, of follow the science right now, but we're going to decide what science is good science and what science is bad science, you know?
Yes. But in terms of the scientific method, failures are good, right?
Yes, sir.
We tried this, it didn't work. Okay, so that doesn't work. Now let's move on and see what might work. So as an example of that, when I was in graduate school at Clemson, I was the AI technician for their beef cattle. And we put Nair hair remover on the hips of those cows, thinking that the Gomer bull would mount them and rub the hair off. And that didn't work. So we didn't use Nair anymore.
I would say, you're talking about failure, I would say it's necessary. I mean, really, with research, it's almost like the point of it is to form organizational structures, and we now know within this box we're correct. But the failure is the line of when we left the box and now we're no longer on that path. I kind of think of training horses that way, that we're trying to stay on this road. And I think there's a lot of people that look at reinforcement and all as we can go off on this ditch. I don't think many people are willing to acknowledge that there's a ditch on the other side also.
Absolutely. I only believe in positive reinforcement.
Yes, sir.
If negative reinforcement worked, there wouldn't be repeat offenders in prison. And probably 85, 90% of incarcerated people are repeat offenders. So if punishment worked, it didn't work for me.
Yes, and let me correct you.
It doesn't work for horses.
Yes, I think you misstated. You said reinforcement a minute ago, and I think you meant punishment. So
Yeah.
There's a Pareto principle there too with the incarcerations. Like I think it is something, with the repeat offenders, something like 90% of the people in prison are, the same small section of the population commits all of the crimes, is essentially what it boils down to. So what we got into positive and negative reinforcement and punishment right there. And I would say that's one of the trends that I see right now. There's a pretty large section, I won't say a large section, but there's definitely a growing contingency of positive reinforcement only people that are approaching that from a fairly purist sort of a direction. And I don't know, maybe it's something. I was probably a little more idealistic when I was younger, and most of these people do tend to be younger, but to me, big part of the horsemanship journey is trying to put as many tools in your toolbox as you can amass. And for whatever situation you come across, maybe you have a tool for that and the tool you're skilled with. And I can't imagine a situation where I would ever pull one tool out of my toolbox that I've spent 40 years accumulating and say, now I'm only going to use this tool for the rest of my life.
And maybe I wasn't clear. There's a line. As long as you're on this side of the line, we'll work with you and set it up again and see if you can find it and keep working and working. But you can't get over you get over that other side of that line, we're in trouble. You're in trouble. It hurts when you do that.
Yeah, that's that little dose of reality and experience for all of that stuff. One of the thoughts that I have with positive reinforcement, and predominantly we'll say food reinforced behaviors, is that, and this is one of the things that I know that we know from the brain science that we know, if a horse goes into the sympathetic nervous system and fight or flight, one of the first physiological actions that occurs there is that digestion shuts off.
Absolutely.
And that's actually how we know that licking and chewing correlates to a dopamine release, because that is when the horse shifts back to the parasympathetic, the digestive system kicks back on, they salivate in their mouth, and then they lick and chew, and we now know where we just arrived back at, or there's a delay, but that's basically how we know licking and chewing is an important sign. And so to me, in theory, I haven't found any research specifically on this, but if I'm going to try to use a food drive method of motivating my animal, and I'm dealing with an animal that is prone to go into a state where digestion doesn't matter anymore, then do I lose everything at that moment? It seems like there's at least a fair risk there, where if I'm using negative reinforcement and touch and pressure and release are involved, then maybe I at least have a rope or a rein or something on that animal where I can have a physical barrier there and use that to get them back to me, you know? So what would be your thoughts in there? Does that make sense to you, or dog won't hunt? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I never feed a horse I feed them in the morning and feed them at night, but I don't use food as a incentive. I'll feed you because you have to be fed. But from my perspective, a horse wants to be left alone. So if I've got a request, I need you to do something, I'm going to apply enough pressure, enough stimulus to get that reaction, and then I'm going to leave them alone. You did what I wanted, okay, we're done. You did what I wanted, okay, we're done.
Yes, sir. One of my little tricks revolves around trailer loading. That's always one of the perennial problems that people come up with. So I've been doing this for years, but I'll take all of my colts, and by the time I'm, let's say, past the first week, generally, the colts don't involve as much of my time anymore. Now we're kind of in more of the, regular paddle of saddle them, get on them, ride them, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So once they're not as time consuming, when I end my ride, I tend to lead them to the trailer and load them up. And that's where I loosen my girth and everything and unload them. And they may not have loaded very many times. It might take me 30 minutes to load them that first day, but by Friday, they're leading me to the trailer. I can't wait to go get in that thing and quit the day. So
if I get in the trailer, you're going to leave me alone. Absolutely.
It becomes a great place. I keep an old stock trailer out in the pasture, and all summer long, the gates are open. I'll have horses just randomly go load up in that. There'll be 3 of them just standing in there in the middle of the day, So the trailer is a good place to my horses.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to give them cookies or carrots or apples or anything to get them in there. Well, with regard to the lessons and the clinics and stuff that you're doing right now, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? What does your average day look like?
I give lessons 2 or 3 days a week, 3 or 4 clients a day. They either bring their horse or ride one of mine, and just the horsemanship journey, just trying to improve our skills.
And do you have a sort of a group that goes to shows with you that you're helping out and that sort of thing?
It seems like it. Yeah. In fact, there'll be 6 or 7 of us over in Louisiana this weekend, kind of the Gotti contention.
Y'all have T-shirts made or maybe a face mask nowadays or something?
No, several years ago, the ranch horse team came up with a T-shirt that the back of it said "Respect the stash," and that was for me.
Yes, sir. You are tailor-made for a caricature kind of a T-shirt deal right there.
Oh, absolutely. It worked out.
Do you know Nick Dowers? You familiar with him?
No, sir, I don't know him.
He won Road to the Horse a few years ago, but he has kind of a not quite a pencil thin mustache, but then the little soul patch right in the center.
Mm-hmm.
And that he made that into his T-shirt design, and the guy could never shave for the rest of his life. But I mean, it's you know exactly who the hell that is. You know, it's perfect. Well, I guess I kind of have one final question for you, if there's nothing else that you want to talk about, and that is, what does success in the horse business look like to you?
I think success in the horse business is being able to progress in your journey as a horseman. It doesn't matter where you are, where you start, or how far you've gone. Success is progressing. I want to be better today than I was yesterday. I want to be better tomorrow than I am today. And I want someday to get on a horse and think, we need to do this, and the horse doesn't. And that to me would be ultimate success.
That actually brings up a few other thoughts for me. Like I guess when I think of you predominantly as a teacher, and I'm probably not alone in that list. So I was honestly expecting you to go a little more to the line of the people that you have influenced, because I think you're one of those people that has influenced many others and helped them along their journey. And that's not a statement that you can make about very many people.
I had a former student come ride with me one day, and we went down and worked cattle at this friend's place. And when we got done, she unsaddled and packed her saddle the same way Ray Hunt taught me to do it. And I thought, damn, that's neat.
I had a moment like that with my older son not that long ago. A little different. I don't remember exactly what he said, but basically he out-me'd me, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I was like, okay, that was a little disrespectful, but I'm absurdly proud of you right now. You know,
that was disrespectful, but it was true.
Really nothing I could say it in this instance right now. Well, I love that success to you deals with the horse, you know, and I know this is actually one of those things I'm a little bit sad about, but when I was apprenticing and horses were my whole life before marriage and kids and all of that stuff, I dreamed about riding horses every single night. I mean, I rode horses all day and I rode horses all night. It was the only thing I did. And I was very, very commonly, I was always the first one at the barn, but I was there till 10 o'clock at night riding just about every night. I mean, I was 16 hours a day after it and dreaming about it at night. And, you know, at that point, it was all about the horse. And it's kind of funny how the journey morphs. I mean, I feel like I spend more time on the person right now. And one of the biggest reasons I started riding horses was so I didn't have to deal with people. And now look where we are. But anyway.
One of the things I say is I'm here to help the horses with their people.
But there are a lot of horses with people problems. There's no question about that. Do you feel like, well, and I'm not trying to make you out to be older than you are, but I mean, there was a period of time where horses were an everyday occurrence for everybody. You know, they were a mode of conveyance. You were plowing, even city people were around horses on a constant basis. And of course, that's not really the case anymore. But I've kind of always felt like if you're just around them that much, that probably everybody had a pretty good level of horsemanship at that point in time. And then the automobile comes along, we kind of lose that in general. But I'm not so sure that what we're having in this horsemanship revolution is really new. I think we're just kind of coming full circle back to something that was maybe a little more common years and years ago. Maybe we have some better methodologies now than what they had at that point in time. But like, for instance, just the ability to read a horse, I would bet that most people could do that pretty well 150 years ago, where that's one of the things a lot of our customers struggle with in this day and age. I'm probably just rambling. I'm sorry.
No, I totally agree with that. You are what you live. And they lived with horses. Kind of extending that, most of the millenniums can't change the oil in their car.
Yes, sir.
Let alone some major, oh, this light came on. What does that mean?
Yeah. I tell that to my son all the time, that if you just say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and be respectful and helpful, and you can do some basic stuff, the bar set so low right now, you will be on a pedestal, you know? I mean,
Absolutely. But
you go to meet a girl's dad and you look like you could actually change a tire, he's going to be like, hell yeah, marry that guy. He's actually useful, you know?
It's an interesting world right now. Almost every store, every business in Nacogdoches has got a help wanted sign.
Yes, sir.
I don't get it. I don't understand that part. And most of the millenniums or whatever they are now, ZYX, I don't know, don't want to work, don't want a job. Some of them don't even want to drive. Like,
yes, sir.
I started driving when I was 12. When I was 14, I got my driver's license and never slowed down. Well, most of them now don't care to drive. I don't get it. I don't understand that.
There's not a lot of ambition. Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a dinosaur.
Well, I don't know. I definitely, I think of some of the things that my buddies and I did and that my parents let us do, you know, and as I'm sitting here with a 15-year-old now, I'm just going, how in the hell if I was like that when I was 15, how did they look at me and think, yeah, it's okay to let him go do that? You know, it just blows my mind. These kids these days, like,
well, hang on a second. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have videos. Most of the stuff we did, they didn't know about.
Well, a lot. So I was from a very rural town in the northeast corner of Louisiana. We had a foreign exchange student that I took on a date. I was 15 or 16. She lived right across the state line in Arkansas. And then it was about 45 minutes from there to Greenville, Mississippi. That was where the first restaurant was. And my parents allowed me to go to 3 states with a girl from Denmark at the age of 15 or 16, have dinner, and then come back. I mean, just telling that story sounds completely, and nobody thought anything about it, you know? I mean.
Right. But they had instilled the basics.
Yeah,
they
and the cell phones, you know, I mean, that was like you were gone. I mean, they were not expecting to contact you for 4 hours or whatever. I mean, hell, we had 2 hours of driving just to get there and back. Good times. So that world will never exist again.
Yeah, that's right. They knew that if you had a flat tire, you'd know how to change it.
I would have been just
They,
fine. Just
they knew, yeah, they knew that you'd watch the gas gauge and not run out of gas. Yeah.
well, Dr. Gotti, it's been a pleasure chatting with you as always. I get a kick out of you every time I get to talk with you, and I certainly appreciate you being on the podcast with me. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about or touch on? We've been almost a couple hours now, so I hate to take up too much of your day.
Well, when I do those clinics and stuff, my little start out speech is, we're all egomaniacs or we wouldn't ride horses.
Okay.
How dare us try to instill our will on another sentient being? We're micromanagers and we're perfectionists. And all three of those things are exactly the opposite of the horse. The horse is only right here, right now. So for the next little while in this clinic, let's use the Jimmy Buffett philosophy. We don't need to get every note right. Let's just capture the magic of the music.
I like it. Yes, sir.
Maybe there's something in there that you can edit out and get a podcast going.
Yeah, that kind of like I've asked you earlier, the thoughts or feelings question. I have always I'm a thoughts person. I'm logical, analytical, and I don't let my emotions make many decisions for me. And that honestly is what I hear when you say that. Like all of a person's natural tendencies, your feelings are taking you in the wrong direction here. So your brain needs to recognize that and override it and make a conscious decision to go this way instead. And so that's what I always view good horsemanship as. It is where you may be fearful, you might be mad, you might be disappointed, you might be whatever. And your challenge is to be conscious of it and then override it and do what you're supposed to do regardless.
Capture the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
All right. Well.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Y'all take care. Yes, sir.
Bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. I've been your host, Daniel Dolphin.